Good morning. Good morning. Thanks so much for joining DeProgram with Ted Rall and John Kiriakou. This morning, John Kiriakou was unable to make it. As you guys might remember, he spent the last couple of weeks out in Western Mexico dodging tarantulas, mosquitoes, and rattlesnakes. But unfortunately, he was supposed to fly back yesterday. And Robbie and I got a message late last night informing us that the Mexicans have canceled John's flight yesterday when he was supposed to be back. So he's en route today, hopefully, and we'll see him tomorrow. Thanks for joining us. Please like, follow, and share the show. Lots to talk about. We are here Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. Eastern Time. We will be back again tomorrow. That's the new time for the foreseeable future. The YouTube monetization problem has been resolved. Money is flowing again, but so feel free to do the what are those things called, Robbie? Super badges or
super chats.
Super chats.
You do super chats, or if you want to become a channel supporter over on YouTube, you can, just like what you can on Rumble. So it all works out. And if y'all see me leaning over, y'all get a good view of my shoulder. It's because I'm triple tasking. So I'm doing the day job, doing the producer work for DeProgram and TMI. So I kind of got a bunch of balls up in the air. So I'm not sniffing glue, boys and girls. I'm actually
or living the Hunter Biden lifestyle.
Yeah, no, I'm not doing that. No Eminem funness here.
And thank you for that explanation, Robbie. Much appreciated. The email address and the PayPal address, should you be so motivated, and thanks to those of you who have donated very kindly, that's much, much appreciated, is deprogrampodcast@gmail.com. Today we're going to be talking about the jewel heist at the Louvre Museum in Paris. We'll be getting into the latest from the Gaza peace ceasefire, or perhaps lack of ceasefire. Israel appears to have broken the ceasefire. We'll get into that. Looks like the main story of the day is going to be regime change. Looks pretty clear, Robbie, that the Trump administration is out to overthrow President Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela. Now he's turning his attention to Colombia. And it looks like some of the victims, at least some of the victims here, aren't even drug dealers at all or drug smugglers. It looks like they're just fishermen. So unless we have beef with Venezuelan fishermen, we probably should reconsider that. Then George Santos, disgraced former congressman, has been pardoned by, or I should say commuted, not pardoned, by Donald Trump. He's out from prison after just 87 days. He says he wants to do prison reform, and I am sad that I'm going to ask John about this tomorrow. I definitely, as you know, the co-host of the DeProgram show, who's actually been to prison. I've only spent a couple of nights in jail. I don't know. I'm trying to think about that. In the U.S., I've spent, I guess, a total of 4 nights in jail. But that's not really 2 years in federal prison. So anyway, we'll be talking about prison reform and, of course, whether George Santos means what he says for the first time in his life. Robbie has been kind enough to triple task. Maybe we can add a 4th job to your to your tasks at the same time. You know, it's the American way. Everyone who has a job will have 3 jobs, and no one else will work at all.
Of course. I mean, that is a good capitalist model, and so I find myself equal to the task.
Excellent. Yeah, pretty funny. Houdini's like Montezuma's Revenge, I assume, relating to John. I think, I didn't ask about that. Tariq says, Trump moves fast on commuting and pardoning, except with John. Yeah, I don't know. Right? What kind of world is it that, pardoning John Kiriakou is more politically fraught than George Santos?
Well, it's because John Kiriakou actually contributes something of value to society and to the body politic, whereas George Santos doesn't. So that's why. I mean, honestly,
you're as cynical as I am, which is saying something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, tell me where I'm wrong. Honestly.
I will believe me, I will when you do that. Thank you very much to FUSO for the pair of donations. America's idea of regime change and revolution is a Trump bad no kings rally. and hashtag general strike. The thing about the general strike thing, I do kind of want to talk about this, Robbie. We should talk a little bit about No Kings. So the No Kings rally happened on Saturday. 7 million people participated. I complained about it vociferously on my social media, talking about what a waste of time it was from a liberal point of view, because it's not going to do anything to slow down Trump. It's just Democratic sheepdog operation. And that, and I even wrote my column this week about that. Currently, it's being considered by the New York Times, but if they pass up on it, I'll just syndicate it. But I guess there's been a lot of people. This has been around a lot, at least since Occupy Wall Street in 2010, where people were saying, "Oh, we should have a general strike." I got to just say, you can't have a general strike without a broad-based, effective organization to set it up. You need millions of people to participate in this. They have to tell all their neighbors to do it. General strike is like sort of a late function of a revolution right before the overthrow of a state. We're nowhere near having a general strike. First, we have to have, I would argue, a broad-based left-wing militant radical organization, like a Socialist Party type thing, that could, I guess, be non-socialist, but it has to be a grassroots organization that is able to bring tens of millions of Americans together to do one thing. We don't have anything like that. So, we can't even organize in any respect whatsoever. So, how are we gonna do a general strike? I mean, that requires a level of militancy outside of the two-party system. Because let's face it, both parties are capitalist parties. They don't want you to stop spending or buying.
Of course not. They want you to keep racking up credit card bills. They want that sweet, sweet interest payments. They want you to mortgage the future for the here and now. And I mean, that's, before I read your book, What's Left, I foolishly thought that there was at least something of a left here in this country, even if it is unorganized. And I've come to realize that there actually isn't. I mean, the closest thing that we have to a resistance, if you can call it that, is coming from the right. And to me, that is absolutely insane. Whenever you have the day where John Kiriakou and Ted Rall agree with Marjorie Taylor Greene about anything,
true.
I mean, that's wild, because that means you're starting to play on my side of the football field, and that's nice to see. And then we just start seeing the people like the great one, Mark Levin, coming out and blasting them as the woke Reich, because they're reaching across the aisle and actually attracting support from the traditional American left, and they act like that's a bad thing. That just lets you show just how scared they are of a true populist movement that frankly ignores the old labels. And I love to see it.
We have, this is worth mentioning. Rebellious Rainbow Unicorn points out over on the Rumble feed that No Kings rallies build solidarity and sharpen organizing skills. I mean, I guess if this is like a testing, 1, 2, 3 testing, but I would say that it's hard to say whether you're on the left or on the right, that this country isn't in a series of crises, right? We have a major crisis of affordability. We have a rising disparity of wealth. We have AI killing jobs right and left. We don't seem to be able to agree on what kind of country we want to be in a whole lot of ways. These are crises. And I don't think we really have a lot of practice time to figure out how to sort of, if we were going to organize and do something and make a demand, we should do it. I mean, the thing is, Robbie, the whole point of a protest, for the most part, is to make demands, right? That's the purpose, right? So in the civil rights era, let us vote, fuckers, right? If you're during the Vietnam War era, stop the war, bring the troops home. In the run up to the invasion of Iraq, don't invade Iraq. That's what the purpose of these are. I mean, the Unite the Right rally wasn't that, but that's because it was kind of a first time that all these disparate aspects of the alt-right were all getting together. It was more of a convention. That's what these No Kings rallies are like. It's more like they're like basically they're parties, they're happenings. It's sort of like the only demand was, hey, come out and have a good time, and maybe wear a funny animal costume. That's not a demand. But, if you do that, the message you're sending, right, is if this is the anti-Trump opposition, well, what does the anti-Trump opposition? No kings? Donald Trump's not a king. Donald Trump doesn't want to be a king. The threat is authoritarianism if you're from the left, if you're on the left. And by the way, authoritarianism is not a Republican problem. It's a American problem. Right. There was a lot of authoritarianism coming out of the Democratic Party, and I'm an example of it. When Joe Biden shut down my employer, which was a media outlet, which is a pretty outrageous thing, and nobody cared. And that's even more outrageous that nobody cared.
Yeah. Well, I would take a step further. I think that authoritarianism, at least as we're talking about it in this context, is more of a Republican small r problem. Whenever republics, whenever they start to break down and the elected class, the ruling class starts doing the bidding of the people who pay them as opposed to the voters, things just start falling apart. And then you start getting disorder, you start having problems. And that's when the people start clamoring for a strong man. Look at you, Augustus. And that's what you get. I think that's where, we're on a freight train to that location right now. If you're going to do a protest, instead of doing a no kings protest, how about you do a protest saying, Congress, do your job? That's actually making a demand.
Little spicy generational conflict stuff. That used to be like a big thing I used to write about. It's how I bought my first house. So I'm very, it's near and dear to me. My best-selling book, Revenge of the Latchkey Kids, back in the 90s. Rebellious Rainbow Unicorn says, Gen X is underestimated by boomers. Boomers are too arrogant. Tammy Landegren said, I'm focused on the boomers who won't retire and the Gen Xers who have checked out. Let's get them back into the convo and retire boomers for the love of all that is holy. Well, that's not going to happen naturally, right? Nobody's going to retire just to be like a nice person and make room otherwise. But, we can pass laws. We used to have mandatory retirement ages in this country. And I'm not so sure. And I'm saying this as someone who's got meat, I've got meat in the game here, right? I'm 62 years old, and mandatory retirement age when I was a kid was like 65. And honestly, my body aches all the time. I could really see like wanting to be retired by 65. And, I would love my kid to start thinking about having, his own kids of his own so I could spend time with them. I don't know that a mandatory retirement age is necessarily a terrible thing as long as we have a retirement system. The problem is that so many of us ended up with bullshit 401ks that don't give us enough money to retire on. We have defined contribution, but not defined benefit retirement plans. And I think the U.S. government needs to step up, stop sending money to Israel and Ukraine, and start taking care of its own people, including older people who need to be able to retire in order to make room for younger people. Otherwise, we're going to end up like France, where no one who's 21 can ever get a job.
Well, that, and also have to fix the education system, because a big part of the problem is that the American population, as a whole, is just simply uneducated. And that is I've told you this on the TMI show. I think that is a feature. It's not a bug. They want the American people to be stupid, or at least undereducated, so that way you have all these entrepreneurs, oligarchs is the best thing to call them. Somebody said, "Oh, there's no one qualified here. We got to open the gates, bring in just the hundreds of thousands of people using H-1B visas, so we can drive down wages even more." So we've got to address the education problem and the H-1B visa problem before you even start thinking about a retirement system.
Over on the YouTube chat, Robbie, we've got like some desire to hear like why on earth did Donald Trump pardon George Santos? We don't have to do anything in any particular order, as you well know. I usually just do the rundown and let John choose. So you're playing the role of John today. So George Santos. So George Santos, of course, I'm not going to get into who he is. Anybody who's watching this show knows who he is and what he did and how he ended up in jail. But the point is that Trump pardoned him. I'm sorry, I should say commuted his sentence. I keep confusing that. He was only in the clink for 84 days. He emerged from the federal correctional institution called Fairton. He was in solitary confinement. He complained vociferously about the way he was treated. They said that there were threats against him, which is why they had to put him into solitary confinement. Apparently, and the federal prison system doesn't deny this, so I'm going to assume that it's true. When you're in confinement, you're not entitled to have your own clean underwear, so they bring you dirty underwear, and then that's been used by other prisoners, and then you have to use those underwear. That's pretty gross, especially for a frou-frou guy like George Santos. It must have really bothered him. I think it would have bothered me too. Anyway, he now says that he was treated so badly, the experience was so brutal, that he plans to dedicate the rest of his life to advocating for prison reform. I have many questions about this, but let's start with the question from the live chat, right? Why is George Santos out of prison, but John Kiriakou hasn't been pardoned yet?
Well, like we said, I mean, John Kiriakou actually performed a public service. He is an enemy of the state. He exposed and embarrassed people in power, starting with John Brennan and working all the way down. George Santos ripped people off, which, let's be honest, that is what pretty much every politician right now does. They rip off the voters. If you are an insurance CEO, you rip off the people who pay their healthcare premiums. If you work for Google or YouTube or a big old conglomerate like that, you data mine people, sell their information, and then if they say something you don't like, if they have an unapproved opinion, they cancel you. I mean, that's why George Santos is a creature of the system. John Kiriakou is a threat to the system. So that's why. Honestly, another thing
but I think Trump personally, right? Like what he said, that what he liked about George Santos was that he voted reliably Republican.
Yeah, so what?
The message seems to be, right, this is about personal and party loyalty above all else. By the way, I had a colleague of mine who's a very gifted and one of my favorite cartoonists, even though he's far right, Mike Lester. But he was posting on his Facebook today, like, oh, what's with Democrats threatening the life of their president, Donald Trump? And I'm like, Donald Trump's not their president. Donald Trump has made very clear that he's only your president if you're in the GOP and you vote Republican. He's not even your president if you're on the right and you're not a loyal Republican. You have to be a loyal Republican and a loyal Trumpy. Then he's your president. So, it's kind of like not that surprising that people might not view him as their president.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'm a creature of the right, but I guarantee you that Donald Trump would count me an enemy if he knew who I was.
Yeah, probably the worst kind, in the same way that Democrats hate me more than they hate Republicans, because they, I'm a traitor. I'm a vote that in a level of support that they ought to be able to count upon without having to work for me at all. Right? It's the same thing.
Sure, completely. It's exactly that. It was just like, for example, if you are going to do omnibus bills as opposed to standalone bills, I'm going to oppose you on that. If you outspend what the Obama administration did, not once but twice, I'm going to oppose you on that too. If on one side of your face you're going to say, okay, I'm going to go to war with the drug cartels and secure the borders, but then you're going to start trying to do regime change wars in South America that just exacerbates the problem, I'm going to fight you on that one too. Mm-hmm. If you're going to use my tax dollars to fund a genocide in Gaza, I'm going to fight you on that too. And so I'm the worst kind of right winger there is. I'm one that I don't actually believe what the things that I say.
Yeah, that's always problematic. Nobody really likes that in this country. By the way, if you're just joining us here, John Kiriakou is out because his flight from Mexico was canceled, and I assume he'll be back tomorrow. I can't even imagine that it would take more than 24 hours to get back, but we will keep you up to date on that. Robbie, if you have an ad, by the way, we can. You could probably you have access to the stream, and you can just read that at any time.
I do. I'll go ahead and do it right now. Hold on,
all right, go ahead and do that. While you're doing that, I will just address Real. Thanks for the contribution over on the Rumble feed. Last week, the EU announced that they were working with NATO on a drone wall to protect Europe. Are they dropping the facade of an economic union only? And how does this affect the Ukrainian plan to join the EU?
Let me go ahead and read this real quick before you jump into that.
Okay, cool.
You've probably noticed Rumble is growing fast and it's not slowing down. They're building a real alternative to big tech that puts creators first and actually protects free speech. And now there's Rumble Premium, an easy way to upgrade your experience. With Premium, you get ad-free viewing across the platform, no pre-rolls, no interruptions, just the content you came for. Plus, Premium members unlock exclusive content like bonus videos, behind-the-scenes drops, and more from your favorite creators. Right now, Rumble is offering $10 off an annual subscription. Just go to rumble.com/premium and use the promo code STUDIO at checkout. That's rumble.com/premium, promo code checkout. No ads, more freedom, and content you actually care about. That's the deal. And just dovetail it off of that. If you're on Rumble, you will see a Rumble Premium button right here on the DeProgram channel. If you click on that one instead, then John and Ted will get some profit sharing off of that. So that actually will help them more than if you go to the URL.
Very true. Thank you so much for that, Robbie. So getting back to this EU thing, look, I think that's a good question that Real has. And I think what's happened is that the EU and NATO are kind of merging into one and the same. They didn't used to be. There was a Venn diagram. But I think as Trump expressed skepticism from NATO, just even though it's been verbal, it's not like he's yanked financial support in any kind of meaningful way from NATO. The EU is becoming increasingly starting to look like a military alliance. And I want to send all the presidents and prime ministers in the European Union a copy of The Guns of August, the Barbara Tuchman book, class about the run-up to World War I, and how that basically explained how all the interlocking and intertwined alliances set up a series of dominoes that basically resulted in a war that nobody wanted because an Austrian archduke made like a wrong turn and ended up in the crossfire of an anarchist, right? Intertwined alliances are dangerous. Mutual defense pacts are dangerous. When you have a fight that, like, let's say, you and I have an arrangement, like, Robbie, if you get into a fight with someone, I come to your defense and vice versa. Right. Then, like, let's say I go out and get drunk and like pick a fight recklessly with someone and I act like a complete asshole, then you're beholden to come and get your own ass kicked with me, even though really maybe that's not such a smart idea because maybe I'm behaving recklessly. And we're sort of seeing that with, the Ukrainians certainly seemed to, at least in part, pick a fight with Russia. And now suddenly, like, we're involved with that. And we didn't even have a mutual defense treaty with them. But, it does seem like maybe NATO will just go away at some point and the EU will just become a military self-defense pact and will just assume all the roles of NATO in the future.
Well, that's the problem with alliances, right? Is that it gives smaller, weaker countries the ability to leverage the military, economic, and political strength of the larger nations. That's the problem. That's why Israel is such a threat, is because it's this little pathetic country that's completely useless in any metric of the world. They have their economy is smaller than New Jersey's. They have a population of 9 million people. They're committing a genocide, and they would not be able to do it without the political, economic, and monetary support of the American taxpayer, which, by the way, we haven't given our consent to be given to them. That's the problem with these alliances. As an America First kind of guy, I want every American military base closed overseas. I want to bring everything back home. That money is being used right now to support this global empire. Let's use that money here at home. Let's put the army on the border with Mexico, shut the border down. If the cartels want to fight, let's go and give them one. But let's actually focus here on home. Let's fix our infrastructure. Why does China get to have trains that go 300 miles an hour, but we don't?
Robbie, the guy who invented the term blowback is Chalmers Johnson. He's the late great professor at UC San Diego who wrote a number of books. His last one was about empire, the American empire. And while he was researching his book, he called the Department of Defense, as it was then called, and asked for them for a comprehensive list of all U.S. military bases overseas. They didn't have anything like that. So then he asked, do you have any, can you tell me the total number of military bases, or maybe break them down by category? And they didn't have that either. And then he asked them, well, how many are there approximately? And they said, we think between 800 and 1,200. So literally, when the Defense Department doesn't know how many military bases there are, and it's not like they said, oh, it could be 821 or it could be 822. 800 to 1,200 is sort of like ish. Once you're at ish, you're overextended. I bet McDonald's knows exactly how many stores it has in the world.
Oh, I'm sure it does, but it's because it's a real company. They have a bottom line they have to meet. All we have anymore is empire. We go around, we act like we're still the lone power on the planet. We act like we're the only ones that matter, and we tell these other countries, hey, you better do this or else. And as a right winger, I'm like, why? Caracas is not my problem. Moscow is not my enemy.
No,
Jerusalem
they're
means
really
nothing
not.
to me. And so my question is why can't we just focus on problems here at home? Let's rebuild our education system. Maybe let's do something about the homeless people who are living under bridges, freezing to death here in Montana now that winter's here. Maybe we could do something about not being able to buy houses. There are bigger issues right now than worrying about what is the border between Russia and Ukraine going to look like when most Americans couldn't show you where either Russia or Ukraine are on a map because they're totally uneducated. So it's dumb.
Quick question. Oh God, we have to talk about this. But okay, first question is from Perusa Taja. Ted, what do we think about France's 2027 election? I understand de Villepin has an organization he's thinking of running. My impression is that he's less Western-centered, given his background. Yeah, I agree with that. Look, I think it's everything in the upcoming election in France is up in the air. Jourdain is probably going to run for the far right because Marine Le Pen can't, because of that court ruling. Macronisme is completely finished. I think the bottom line is there's too many moving parts at this stage. We're not going to know shit about what the French election is going to look like until late 2026 at the earliest. So I hate to punt, but I think there's no way to say that otherwise. We've got to talk about Argentina. Before we talk about, are we done with George Santos? I think we are. Do you really believe he's going to become a prison reformer?
As far as George Santos goes, I honestly don't know what he's going to do. Maybe he'll start himself a new gay nightclub in New York. We
really do need a prison reform movement in this country. It's out of control.
Well, you're not going to get that with private prisons. It's impossible.
Well, that's true. Part of the reform would be getting rid of private prisons for sure.
And so you're going to trust a con man to spearhead that? I don't.
No. That's my problem. I don't trust him to do anything. Gay nightclub would be good, actually. He really would be a perfect impresario. I would invest in that, except I would not let him have any access to the bank account.
No, I would not either.
But he'd be good at it.
I do have a quick question real quick before we move on. About the question about, you said that this dude's probably going to run to the right there in France.
Yeah.
I've never been to France. I'm not French. On the political spectrum, are the far right in France as right as I am, or are they a lot more to the left than what I am? Like what is the right in France relative to me? Because that's the only kind of metric that I have to gauge it by.
Well, the truth is that you'd have a lot in common. The right is very nationalist, France first. Don't worry about problems overseas and other parts of Europe. It's Eurosceptic. It's not necessarily ready to drop out of the European Union. There won't be a Frexit probably because simply it's too popular. The French like to be able to travel throughout Europe and work and own property throughout Europe without having to get special permissions, which is the way it used to be before. But the short answer is that French politics are far to the left of ours. So for example, the idea that climate change is actually happening is not in question on the far right. The only some on the right might say, maybe that's not a top priority in terms of the ways we spend money, but we agree that it's happening and it should be like a priority. Or also, basic things like they're not that, like, for example, LGBTQ rights, abortion rights, those things are not in question in France. Those are baked in. You're just going to have the overall assumptions of, like, for example, social programs. You should be able to retire when you're 62. If you are unemployed, you should be able to collect unemployment benefits. All of those things are baked in from left to right. So there's a lot of stuff that we debate about that we don't debate about here at all. So I think you would find yourself outside of French politics. Like, for example.
So I'd be chill with the Nazis then.
They might. The skinheads might flirt with you. Let's talk about Argentina. So okay. Nobody's talking about this. So Donald Trump is gay for the new president of Argentina, Mr. Milei. And so Mr. Milei introduced harsh austerity measures when he came in to try to rein in Argentina's notorious 100+% inflation rate. And now none of that has worked. And the Argentine economy is collapsing. And it requires or desires a bailout. Donald Trump is sending Argentina, his little butt buddy, $20 billion. Now, when I remember, I already know the answer to this question because when this story broke, I texted it to you and I said, does this sound like America first to you? And you answered,
no, there's nothing America first about it.
How is it that this is like not being commented on? It's not being commented upon by anybody. First of all, let's go with your side of the aisle here. The right is not talking about this. And I mean the right that is sometimes with and sometimes not with Trump. Right. Is how come this story is just not on the radar? It's so insanely, hypocritical.
I think just because a lot of people don't really understand what it is. Here in Montana, it came up. It actually was in our local newspaper because one of the things that Trump's talking about doing is buying a bunch of Argentine beef. The problem is that here in Montana, for example, where I am, we have these things called ranches. And what do ranches do? They raise cows and they kill them and they butcher them and then they sell the meat. So that is a direct threat to the Montana beef industry. So now you have a lot of people here, and also in Wyoming and the Dakotas. It's like, Mr. Trump, we turned out for you, we supported you, and now you're directly competing against us doing a welfare program for a failed state in South America. How is this America first? I think that's kind of where it is. I think it's probably more of a regional issue. Like if you're on the East Coast or the West Coast, you don't really care about where your food comes from. It's a non-issue. It's just another bailout package. But if you come from an agriculture state like what I do, it's a big problem. And not only is it a problem, it's also a betrayal.
And then as for the left side of the aisle, or maybe more accurately, the liberals and the Democrats, I think they're not saying shit for the simple reason they could use this to beat up Trump, but they're such globalists and internationalists that they would do exactly the same thing, albeit maybe not to Argentina, but maybe to another country. But they love sending U.S. taxpayer money to other countries while Americans are sleeping on the street and getting evicted from their homes and unable to afford to send their kids to college and, and worried about getting Christmas gifts for their kids. They don't care. They're literally, This is U.S. taxpayer money. In other words, it's sucked out of our paychecks and then it's being sent to basically fix the mistakes of a fucking economic moron in South America.
Yeah, well, also, there comes a point where hypocrisy becomes too rich even for the Uniparty, right? Because if you're going to come out against a welfare bailout for Argentina, then you're going to fuel people like Thomas Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Dave Smith, other populists on the right and in the center, say, well, then if it's bad to bail out Argentina, who's at least in our hemisphere, why is it okay to continue supporting countries all around the world like Egypt and Jordan and Israel and all these other places? So I don't think they want to open that particular can of worms because they don't have an answer for it other than sound shut up racist. That's all they've got at that point.
Robbie, let's since we're in Latin America, let's talk about Venezuela and Colombia. So I don't know if you saw the story in the Washington Post.
I've got a question for me real quick from Martina. I'm going to answer this. Robbie, if it's a betrayal, how will you vote next time? I will vote next time like I did this time. I'll vote third party. I voted for Dr. Shiva in the last election. I was the only person in Montana who voted for Dr. Shiva.
I'm sure that's true, and that can be verified. You can look it up on the website of the Board of Elections for the state of Montana.
He had one vote. That was me.
That was you. All right. So the Washington Post had a late-breaking story that basically belied Trump's claim, all of Trump's claims about the boats that he's been blowing up off Venezuela. Trump has said, first of all, that these are members of a Venezuelan gang called Tren de Aragua. The insider information from inside the Pentagon shows there's no evidence whatsoever that that's true, that zero of these boats or people were affiliated with Tren de Aragua. They're from Venezuela for sure. Yeah. And people who have seen the internal data basically said these are ships that were probably carrying cocaine and marijuana to Trinidad and Africa. Nothing coming toward the United States. None of them carrying fentanyl at all. Venezuela doesn't make fentanyl in significant or even any quantities whatsoever. So this is all a cover-up. And the person who was the source for the WAPO story said it was very clear from reading all this that this is all an attempt to do just regime change against the presidency of Nicolas Maduro, the socialist, who's in the Hugo Chavez mode, albeit, maybe less charismatic. And now things are moving over to Colombia, where over the weekend, U.S. forces blew up a boat that was supposedly tried that basically was being used by the National Liberation Army, which is a left-wing resistance group against the current government of Colombia. And now he's calling President Petro, Trump is, an illegal drug dealer. And Colombia, in the meantime, called this murder on the high seas. And of course, that's true. It is true. And basically the question is Donald Trump now trying to regime change both Venezuela and Colombia? And how would blowing up these boats do that? I mean, I don't see, you can blow up all the boats in the world coming out of any country. I don't see how that's going to topple your government.
Well, what it does, it will just show just how weak the governments are. I think that's really what it is. They're just trying to cause domestic pressure, just trying to say, hey, look, he can't keep you safe. And also, I mean, people fish because they want to eat, right? So if you start making it harder for people to be able to start bringing in food, that could cause problems to already kind of go through sanctions. A better question is how's this America first? Again, Congress, where are you? If we're going to go to war against not one, but two countries in our hemisphere, maybe Congress should actually do its job and declare war. Second of all, if you're like me, and if you want immigration to end and you're concerned about migration, then probably starting a war in Latin America is probably the last thing that you want to do, because that gives you more of what you don't want. So I'm going to use that dreaded R word. It's retarded. And if Trump was really concerned about drug cartels, Mexico is the problem. It's not Colombia. It's not Venezuela. It's Mexico. And that's much easier.
As John pointed out last week, the relationship between the U.S. and Mexico in terms of sharing intelligence is too intimate to, ironically, right? We're so close to them that we can't ask them to do anything about their cartels, the ones that are actually fucking with us. This is that stupid joke that I always like to tell about the two cops who chase the suspect, and the suspect runs down a scary dark alley, and the rookie catches up to his experienced veteran, and he's like, "Why are you out here in the street looking for him when he ran down that evil dark alley?" And he goes, "Feels better to look out here." It's like it's easier to blow up Venezuelan and Colombian speedboats. By the way, we're starting to get some evidence. Manila on TMI had pointed this out. It's only going to be a matter of time before someone's mom is going to step forward and say, "That's my son. He was a good boy. He was a fisherman." That's starting to happen now. It's already happened with a few of the victims of these killings. We're going to end up at some point with some enterprising international lawyer is going to end up in The Hague at some point, filing charges against the U.S. and against Donald Trump for the murder of their kid, who's a fisherman, right? I mean, that's going to happen.
Yeah, well, so what? Just ignore it. I mean, I'm dead serious. I mean, like, for example, if I was President West, I'm going to give myself a promotion. So before I got assassinated, because that would 100% happen, I would start.
You always say that like you want it to happen.
Well, because there's nothing more powerful than a martyr. So if you're going to do that, I mean, if you're going to make a stand, at least make one that's principled and then just pay those dividends later on, right? Like, for example, Trump is too soft on deportations, in my opinion, as you know. That's an unpopular opinion here on DeProgram probably, but that's where I stand. And so I know what happened. Judges will come out and say, "Mr. President, you can't do this." Then I would just pull Andrew Jackson and say, "Okay, you made your ruling, now enforce it. Keep on going." It's the same thing, with international law. These judges, they can pass their stuff. Okay, fine. Who cares? What are you going to do? The answer is nothing. Just ignore it.
Yeah, well, that's true, and that's that's not just a Trump thing. That's a America thing.
So if you don't like what I'm doing, I mean, if you don't like how I protect you, then I can just simply withdraw my protection. For example, why is it that the American military protects Europe while Europe then turns right around and criticizes the United States? Hey, if you want to criticize us, that's fine. But that means I have zero obligation whatsoever to protect your little cheese-eating butt. Pay for your own military.
I like cheese. Cheese is really good. Cheese is one of my favorite things.
So I would pick that fight every day. And I guarantee if you had a president that had some spine and maybe a working brain cell, he would win that fight.
All right, let's move on a little bit. I mean, let's see if we have anything else to say about this. My personal take on this, and I'm looking forward to talking to John about it tomorrow, is I think Colombia is a sideshow. It's a part of the pressure campaign against Venezuela. Trump wants Venezuela. He wants a puppet in Venezuela because Trump is transactional and he doesn't care about drugs. Trump is interested. Or do you think Trump cares about drugs? I don't want to just say that. I mean, look, I care deeply about the fentanyl crisis. I'm from flyover country. I'm from Ohio. Dayton, my hometown, for years was, and it's still a major part of it, was ground zero in the fentanyl crisis. We had so many young men dying in Dayton, young men usually, that they ran out of storage for the bodies at the morgue, and they had to open up some abandoned elementary schools and fire up the old, meat lockers and start storing the corpses there because they just couldn't process them fast enough. It really is a fucking scourge in places like rural Kentucky and Tennessee, and all over the country. Do you think the president actually is concerned about that? Because I don't want to just sort of brush that off automatically.
I don't think he is. I think for him, it's all about oil. I think he wants the oil. I think for him, it's economic. I mean, seriously, if you're concerned about fentanyl, most people don't know this. The American Army was on the Mexican border since the end of the Mexican War up to like the 1950s. If you're going to be an officer, you started off there on the border. General Jack Pack Pershing was famous for his cross-border raids into Mexico and chasing Pancho Villa. I mean, the United States and Mexico have never been friends. Mexico is not an ally. It's always been an adversarial state. And you can make an argument for why. I mean, the United States, we stole half their country. So I understand, where it's coming from, right? I get it. I understand. But to say these cartels are not at war with the American people is a complete joke. 100,000 Americans die every single year because of the drug trade. But no one cares. No, this is all about the oil. They don't care about dead Americans.
Well, especially because, let's face it, a lot of the, a disproportionately high number of the victims are poor and working class, right?
Yeah, they don't care. They don't care about them. They have no political power.
Yeah, I think that's sad, but totally true. Anyway, so I think you're right. I think this is about Venezuela, not Colombia. Colombia is just sort of like more like, hey, we're wild dogs. It's the madman theory, Nixon's madman theory, writ large. All right, no way to maybe. What do you want to talk about first? Louvre or Gaza?
Oh, I want to talk about the Louvre. I love a good crime story. And that's what this is. It's freaking awesome.
So yeah, let's talk about what happened. So yesterday morning, these what appear to be, according to the Parisian authorities, professional gang of jewel thieves, basically pulled up a furniture lift truck in front of the Louvre. If you haven't been there, is not one building. It's a bunch of buildings that were part of a old palace, and they went into the Galerie d'Apollon. They basically pulled up next to it, and they call it a first floor, but in Europe the first floor is really the second floor. The rez-de-chaussée is the first floor. They went up to the second floor, we would say in America, and went up through the window, broke the window, came in. They used metal and glass cutting machines. It all happened very, very fast, right? It was all over in 7 minutes. It was so fast that they left some of their tools behind. Apparently the cops, I don't know if they're bluffing, claimed that DNA was recovered. If so, that would be sloppy, because you would just think that anyone who's a professional would be aware of that. It would be covered from head to toe with like long plastic gloves and so on.
Right.
But anyway, they left behind some equipment, and they also dropped a 1,354 diamond crown while they were on their way out. The alarms are going off. The museum's been put on lockdown because the museum was open. There were visitors there. Huh. This took place at 9:30 in the morning local time. So I guess the first question has to be, what's the motive here? I mean, in other words, yes, okay, these are incredibly valuable, but you can't fence these, right? You can't show up at 47th Street in the Diamond District in New York City and say, I inherited Empress Eugénie's pearl-diadem, and however you pronounce that, and I'd like to how much can you give me for that? So the only, as I can see it,
you start some Middle Eastern sheikh and call it a day.
I was going to say it's either a private collector who's going to keep it in their home, never to be seen by anyone but their closest friends, or they're going to tear it all apart and recut all of the gems, right? One of those two.
Sure. Between the two of them, because one of the things about jewelry, at least my understanding, the only jewelry I have is my wedding ring. So I'm going to show my ignorance here. My understanding is that people like jewelry because of the age, the artistry of it, not necessarily just because of the materials of it. Because if all you wanted was just, like, say, the gold, why'd you knock off the Louvre? Why not just go rob a regular old jewelry store and melt down that gold? So I think it's because they wanted these historical gems. They're famous. I think this is for a collector, probably some dude with a rather robust and happy camel herd in Dubai or something.
I agree with you. Everything you just said, I totally do. And this is, so of course it's funny, right? Because it's like, okay, so then the sheikh dies, right? Someday. Right. And then what, right? Like, do the kids just say, Dad, he was a wacky one. Yeah. And then that becomes your secret too, I guess.
Yeah, of course. Unless you're a prince, you have diplomatic immunity. You say, "Look what Grandpa got back in the day," and just sit right there in your living room. Yeah, look at this, France. Look what we got.
Do you think there's any chance? A Louvre employee 100 years ago stole the Mona Lisa. That was ultimately recovered. Do you think there's any chance that these can be recovered?
I mean, there's always a
The
chance.
DNA is the DNA is the key component here, if that's true, right?
Yeah, if it's true, because if you're a professional, I mean, you're going to be covered head to toe. You're going to do all the things. You're going to shave you're going to shave hair. You're going to shave everything. You're going to go in there. You're not going to have any.
You can't leave a whisker behind, right?
Yeah.
People shed a lot of hair. We don't really think about that, right? But like the average person sheds something like 60 hairs off their head every single day. You know when you're stressing out, running up that furniture lift at 9:30 in the morning. Why'd they do it then? Why do you think they didn't do it in the middle of the night? Maybe because nobody's expecting it then?
Well, it's that. Not one of the things I would really be interested in is.
I'm curious about the getaway. I mean, think about it. They drove off probably, I'm going to guess, probably on scooters because that's the fastest way. But the thing is, Paris is lousy with cameras. Oh, kitty. Yep, it's lousy with cameras, right?
Yeah, here's the cat. The cat has to come in and say hi.
Oh, if that's how it is, we're going to have a cat off.
Yeah, let's do it. So your cat's prettier. Now, I think that probably what they're doing, like if I was going to do this,
cat off.
Because again, I like to read a lot. I would say the traffic patterns around the place I was going to knock over. So if there was a place, like say the Louvre is very famous, I would look for where the traffic is most congested. So that way the police response would be slower. And I would hit during that time. Like I would look to see what time is it that the mail trucks and things are going. Because I want maximum congestion.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how.
Then you can get up on the sidewalk, go in between the cars. I agree with that. But this is on a Sunday morning. I mean, there's not much traffic in Paris at that time.
Yeah.
And the Louvre, and by the way, the Louvre is it's downtown. It's in a businessy part of town. It's less residential. So I'm sure it was a very quick getaway, but it's surprising to me that that the cops wouldn't be able to just be like, just look at the cameras and be like, they went here to here to here. After the Boston Marathon bombing, the Tsarnaev brothers were on the lam. And like literally the cops in Boston, which is a less cameraed city than Paris, were able to sit in the control center and just be like, what facial recognition software, and literally be like, there they are. Oh, here they are. They're by Fenway. Oh, here they are. And they just sat there. And I remember just thinking like, man, being a cop's not hard anymore. So it's interesting to me that they made it to some kind of safe house and probably ditched, their clothes and whatever they were driving and switched to something else. And they're either laying low in one spot or they're already out of Paris. If it were me, I would lay low in one spot. And then, if I ever did anything like this, I would take like I'd have food and water and beer for 6 months. And I would literally not show my face outside until basically the heat was off.
Oh, for sure. Can I agree with you more? That's exactly what I would do.
So, all right. So we'll see what happens here with that. It's an interesting story though. I guess another question is, could something like this ever be avoided? Or is it just one of those things like I always remember just driving around, France and all the ruined castles and Chateau Fort, all the fortresses and just and they're all ruined. And you're just like, basically the message here is if someone wants to get in, they can. And if someone wants to steal something, they can. And is it basically, should museums stop having displays of these incredibly valuable, artifacts, or is it sort of like that's just the risk you take for being a human being?
I think that's just risks that you take. One, if you're in law enforcement or any kind of defense, you just got to realize you've never had the initiative. The bad guy always does, and you have to be successful 100% of the time. The other guy just has to be successful once. So I think that's just how it is. I think it's just the nature of the beast.
And I guess, 5 minutes left. Let's talk about Gaza. So ceasefire agreement was signed last week. Right-wingers spent the weekend decrying the refusal of liberals to give Trump credit for achieving peace in the Middle East. But it looks like the liberals were right because we don't have peace in the Middle East. There's ceasefire was broken. Apparently, 2 IDF soldiers were killed along the so-called yellow line of partial withdrawal in Rafah in southern Gaza. And basically, Hamas said, look, that wasn't us. We lost touch with our fighters in southern Gaza months ago, which frankly, their story seems very credible to me, given just the way Gaza looks right now, and given the very lengthy response and of explanation that Hamas made. It's sort of the subtext of that is, listen, that really wasn't us. But nevertheless, the Israelis retaliated and launched airstrikes throughout Gaza. They killed at least 44 Palestinians. But that said, I want to talk to you a little bit about the coverage of this. So the New York Times and AP and other outlets said Israel tests ceasefire. Wouldn't it be more accurate to say Israel breaks ceasefire?
Yeah, because they did. They 100% broke the ceasefire.
Why can't they say that?
Well, it's kind of like with the whole George Santos thing. You can't go around and start telling the truth, because then you got problems. So it's just, what you do is that you just double down on the doublespeak. It's just like, oh, we're just going to test it. We're going to see what we're able to do. We're going to see how's Hamas going to react to this. What's the fallout going to be? What's Trump going to say now that he's talking to Zelensky? What can we get away with? And the answer is they can get away with whatever they want, because Trump is on his knees as usual. And Israel, I do not see this ceasefire holding. Israel wants to ethnically cleanse the Gazans. It wants to ethnically cleanse the West Bank. They're going to do what they're going to do. And it's in Bibi's political interest to keep this war going, because as soon as it ends, his goose is quite literally cooked. He knows this. So this isn't going to end.
That is correct. Do we have any ads?
We possibly do. Hold on one second. I'm getting the TMI show set up right now. Let me go ahead and take a look.
Okay, you go do that. Never mind the ad. You go do TMI, because we're out in 3 minutes. So yeah, I mean, look, I think I agree with your analysis about Israel. They do not want. They've broken every ceasefire up until now. I think Hamas wants this ceasefire because it knows it has Israel exactly where it wants it, at a low point of international public opinion. And they're just hated and reviled by everyone. And I think they want more than anything, a foreign media to come in, start talking to Palestinians about their horrific experiences throughout the war. And they're going to start digging up those pits. I mean, think about the ambulance crew that was intercepted by the IDF. They were summarily executed and dumped into pits. None of this would have ever come to pass or come to light. This is how I should more accurately. If it hadn't been for one of the victims keeping his cell phone running in his pocket while he was being killed and buried alive. That basically was, that's how we know. That's one thing that we know. And if we know one thing like that, there's, 50 more. There's tons of My Lai massacres that happened in Gaza. We've got to wrap it there. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching DeProgram with me, Ted Rall, and Robbie West filling in for the, I don't say vacationing, traveling John Kiriakou. John Kiriakou will be back tomorrow. We're here Monday through Friday, 9 o'clock Eastern time. Please share, like, follow, subscribe to the show, and do watch us over on Rumble, where we tend to make more money. Money's actually finally starting to trickle into our bank accounts now after all this time. Really, we just literally saw a dispersal yesterday, so that was really great. Please stay tuned if you like this. You might like the TMI show with me and Manila Chan. We have a bit of a lighter approach to the news, and we tend to do stories that are a little funnier and quirkier. We're going on the air right now. See you tomorrow, and take care, and bye. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Robbie.